Today we're going to be showing you how to line up O Canada so that you can end up with perfect maple leaves on your quilts. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we put sticky tape on both sides of the ruler because we're going to be flipping it. So you can see here I've already done that. You have sticky tape in your package. Please make sure you don't use your fabric scissors for this. You use a different kind of scissors because it will destroy your fabric scissors. And also note, if you've got a sew slip mat on your table like I do here, please make sure that you don't let the sticky tape come in contact with that. So what I want to do is the first thing I'm going to do is line up my center line on this foot, on the ruler here, and my center line here. So there's a set of 3 lines, and you always want to use the center because that indicates where your needle will be. So I want to stop there. Use that one there and use that center there. And then up at this end here, I'm just going to pan out a bit here. Up at this end here, I've got the grid mark here, and I'm going to use that same center line to make sure that I'm nice and square. Because this ruler is a little bit larger than some of the other ones we have, you want to make sure you have a firm grip. So if you have needle down on your machine, this is absolutely when you want to use it. So let's take this for a spin here. You want to hold onto your ruler tight, and you're going to come over to your ruler a little bit. That's going to mean that you end up in your center. So when you get to these little corners, you want to make sure that you're holding onto your ruler tightly. Okay, and if you have to go a little slower, that's totally fine as I speed up. But you want to go a little slower around those corners to make sure that you end up with those corners. And it's okay to stop and adjust and move your hands so that you've got a nice good grip on that and it's straight down on your fabric so your fabric is remaining taut. Otherwise you're going to end up with some puckers in there. So this is the point I'm going to stop and still make sure that I'm all nice and squared up because we want to make sure when we come around this last bend that we're in our center. Okay, and so that's going to bring our needle right back up, and we do. We stop perfectly in the center there. You can see that we've ended up exactly on our line, which is perfect. So we've now completed half of the maple leaf. So at this point you have 2 options. We have to flip the ruler. We're now going to use it the other way. But you can actually either hook on this way and do it the opposite direction. But I tend to try to move the quilt. Now if I'm working on a big quilt, I'll figure out a different way to do it because I don't want to keep moving that. So I want to line up my same lines. And this is why it's important and makes things a whole lot easier if you can look down on the quilt. So if you can look down on the ruler from above, it makes it easier to see those lines and line up. So I'm going to line up my center line again here and my bottom line here. I'm going to turn this way just because I find that direction a whole lot easier to control the ruler. So I've got a center line marking there. I've got my center line lined up there, and I've got my line lined up there. So you want to make sure your fabric's taut. So if you have to give it a little push just to make sure that it's nice and taut, that'll make sure that you're all nice and lined up at the bottom. Okay, and another little check is at the bottom here where your foot is, this little part here, you want to make sure that you're lined up on that edge, and that makes sure that you're nice and square. And everything comes down into the right spot. And then basically you're just going to repeat that and come back down the other side. Again, using caution when you go around these corners, because it's very easy to come off that. You want to make sure you're holding down the ruler and keep your stitching. Yeah, goal of course is to keep your stitching consistent. Actual stitch length isn't all as important as the actual, a little bit more consistent looking. And then you're going to come back down and around. And you're going to get to the bottom. You're going to end up on your line, and then you're going to stitch over to where you started. And then, of course, break your thread. So you end up with a perfect little maple leaf. That was pretty easy, right? So then you can use this, and now you know where your center is. If you want them to overlap, you could do them all the way around in the corner, or you could do them randomly in a quilt by using a nice little spline to get to the next one and do another one over here. Or you can travel to each one using a ditch if you happen to have it. But that's how you're using the maple leaf.